And joining me right now is Louisiana Congressman, House Minority Whip, Steve Scalise. Congressman, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thank you so much for being here this morning. Why do you have to have a hearing without any Democrats participating? How did this come about?
Well, good morning, Maria. And as you know, we've been calling for over a year now, House Republicans, for a hearing on the origin of COVID. This is a virus that has taken over 600,000 American lives, millions worldwide. And for whatever reason, it's perplexing that Speaker Pelosi refuses to have a hearing in any of the committees of jurisdiction on how this started. Now, clearly over the last few months, we've seen a mountain of evidence building that it actually did in fact start in the Wuhan lab. That was something we suggested. We never claimed it, but we were getting evidence that it may have started in that lab over a year ago, and yet Pelosi refuses to have a hearing. So finally, we said, let's have our own hearing, and we've invited a number of expert witnesses. We have some very respected doctors who have looked into this themselves for over a year. And again, you've seen recently with the mounting evidence, with emails that point to this starting in the lab. Why is Speaker Pelosi covering for China? Why doesn't she want to get to the bottom of it? All we're looking for is facts. I think today you're going to see a lot of facts put on the table that might raise even more questions, that will beg the question, why aren't Democrats participating and using their subpoena power where we could bring in even more people who can shed light on this evil virus that's taken hundreds of thousands of lives in America and millions globally?
Well, there's a new piece from the Federalist this morning saying, is the entire Democrat Party compromised by China? House Democrats shot down a GOP motion earlier this month that sought to bar corporate cooperation with Chinese slave labor. This motion to recommit, proposed by Andy Barr, amended a Democrat bill. So corporate disclosure was happening. If you are using slave labor, you have to disclose it to the Treasury, but the Democrats shot it down. So I asked one of your colleagues earlier, it's high time we understand who's being paid by the Communist Party. I don't understand why the Democrats are not participating with the Republicans on getting to the bottom of the COVID-19 origins and holding China to account. Where's the outrage for what the CCP did in Hong Kong last year? Going in there, laying down their own laws 25 years early, not to mention invading India, fighting over the Himalayas, killing Indian soldiers, not to mention what's happening in the South China Sea with all the bullying of its neighbors. Where is the accountability?
It's just completely perplexing. It's bizarre that Speaker Pelosi would cover for China. We're not trying to point a finger at Democrats or even at President Biden. We're saying we all know this started in China. I know they don't even want to use that term. Now there's a mounting evidence that it actually started in the Wuhan lab. Whether, by the way, it was intentional or accidental, we should be asking those questions. And by the way, where's the media outrage? Look, China just shut down a major news publication last week. What's going on? President Biden's talking about giving away our intellectual property for the vaccine to China. Why are they so in bed with China? Why are they so focused on covering up for China? As you mentioned, Andy Barr's motion to say if they're using slave labor, let's get that out on the table too. But they will not stand up to China on any front. It's very bizarre. It raises very serious questions. But again, we're not going to sit back and wait for Democrats to keep covering for China. We're going to go and start asking those tough questions ourselves. We don't have subpoena power because right now we're not in the majority, but we're at least bringing in some experts that have some real relevance and background and have dug into this themselves.
Well, there are also questions regarding the corporate sector. Now you've got this woke narrative making its way through companies. Republicans on the House Intelligence Committee launched an investigation into companies that are going along with the Chinese Communist Party and blowing off American values. China's efforts to manipulate and coerce U.S. businesses to help Beijing carry out its anti-American agenda. Here's Congressman Devin Nunes from Sunday Morning Futures about his probe. Watch.
We've been actually building this investigation for a while, and the sectors we're going to look at are fairly broad and very concerning, and the American people should be concerned. It's not just the things you've heard about, like sports and entertainment. There's also sectors of the economy like technology, agriculture, pharmaceuticals. So we're going to start with about a dozen U.S. entities that we're going to investigate. Probably we'll reach about 4 dozen by the time it's all over with. We'll be notifying those companies this week.
And then, Congressman, you've got Nike, the CEO of Nike, John Donahoe, coming out and being very honest, saying, yeah, Nike is a brand of and for China. Are they using slave labor? Are solar panels being produced by the Uyghurs who are locked up? What about Apple phones?
All very valid questions. In fact, Devin Nunes is going to be one of the witnesses that's testifying. Mike McCall, the head of our China task force, will be testifying, as well as Kathy McMorris Rogers. And these medical doctors, some of the experts, Dr. Gerard, Dr. Quay, who have done really extensive background into what happened in China, especially at the Wuhan lab. And so all of these questions should be wanting to be asked by Democrats and Republicans. I don't know why it is that Democrats, especially Speaker Pelosi, continue to try to cover up for China, because in many cases the crime is really bad here, by the way. And China's covered it up from the very beginning. But the cover up, why would Democrats in Congress be participating in trying to cover up what happened in China to start this virus, let alone what we're seeing with these corporations, as you mentioned? But we're going to get to the bottom of it and at least start asking those questions.
By the way, why are we even having an Olympics in Beijing? Okay, why aren't we walking away from that, given what the CCP just did in Hong Kong? There was such a weak message out of the G7 last week. They called China a challenge. That's it? That's all you've got? The 7 industrial countries? Do you find it odd that the First Lady is going to replace Joe Biden at the Tokyo Olympics? I would think that was something for the vice president, but in fact, First Lady Jill Biden, Dr. Biden, is going to be the representation in Tokyo. What about the Beijing Olympics? And then I got to ask you about Jen Psaki talking about defunding the police. But your thoughts on the Beijing Olympics first.
Well, this is an opportunity where I think President Biden dropped the ball. He should have led this effort to get the world community to stand up to China on the Olympics and say, let's find a different venue. It doesn't have to be in America. There are a lot of countries that have the infrastructure, the athletic facilities to host an Olympics away from China. After everything that happened, for goodness sake, can he at least lead that effort? And I think he would have found a lot of friendly forces around the world that would have liked to join up and do that. But other countries can't lead that effort. That's got to be led by the United States. President Biden won't stand up to China on that. It's very unfortunate, because I think they would have been able to have success.
Congressman, let me switch gears, ask you about the spikes in crimes that we've seen in the last year. We know that the policy has been horrendous, defund the police, wide open borders, ending cash bail, closing down prisons to make the prison capacity less. And then, astoundingly, this week, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki blamed Republicans for defunding the police by voting against Biden's spending plans. Here's what she said to Fox News' Peter Doocy during a White House press briefing yesterday. Watch this.
One of the advisors said this weekend, Cedric Richmond, he said, Republicans defunded the police by not supporting the American Rescue Plan. But how is it that that is an argument to be made when the president never mentioned needing money for police to stop a crime wave when he was selling the American Rescue Plan?
Well, the president did mention that the American Rescue Plan, the state and local funding, something that was supported by the president, a lot of Democrats who supported and voted for the bill, could help ensure local cops were kept on the beat in communities across the country. As you know, didn't receive a single Republican vote. That funding has been used to keep cops on the beat.
Yeah, wow, what a whopper that is.
She turns herself into a pretzel. She turns herself into a pretzel to blame it on Republicans. It's absolutely incredible. How many years were we hearing defund the police from Democrats only to face pushback from Republicans? Your reaction?
Yeah, Maria, the defund the police movement was probably one of the dumbest ideas we've heard from the radical left, who, by the way, have had a litany of really radical, extremist, ridiculous ideas. But defund the police is dangerous, and it's been led by the major city Democrat mayors, by President Biden himself, who was appeasing that movement during the campaign. You had a lot of prominent Democrats in Congress who were openly calling for defunding the police. And guess what? A lot of these Democrat officials took them up on it and defunded their police police. You can look at New York City, where there's shootouts. Go look at Chicago, where their mayor bragged about defunding the police. And how many dozens of shootings do we see in Chicago every single week because they're not even going after criminals? And then you know, they try to say to blame it on Republicans. Maybe Jen Psaki hasn't read that bill that they passed because it's so large, trillions of dollars in borrowed money. But it's not the federal government that funds local police. It's local governments who made the decision to defund their police. That they didn't come to us and say, hey, can you give us the money now so we can fund them again? They don't want to support their local police. And so that wasn't even a part of the discussion on that bill. But it is backfiring because you're seeing crime out of control. What's President Biden's answer, by the way? They're not enforcing local gun laws. So people that are committing these crimes with guns are breaking the law and they're not even prosecuting them. President Biden wants to bring gun control to take guns away from law-abiding citizens when he's not even holding people accountable who actually break the law, committing crimes, shooting people in the streets brazenly all across America. When are Democrats going to stand up to the criminals in America and support the great police who are heroes in our communities?
Yeah, no surprise that defund the police did not end well and is not going well. Congressman, we'll be watching your hearing today on COVID-19 and its origins. Thanks very much for being here this morning. Steve Scalise
Great being with you,
in D.C.